I want to walk through the difference between having a large date-based backlog and a real upstream Kanban system. It's a really important problem that I see a lot of teams fall into, and one of the most dangerous parts about these date-based backlogs is that they don't provide any evolutionary path forward towards having a workflow-based backlog. Or what we might call a upstream Kanban system. So here's where we start off with a date-based backlog. We start off by looking at maybe a team that has a whole slew of work items in a bit of a backlog that they're looking at. And as that list grows, they start to wonder, like, how are we supposed to manage this? And more importantly, bigger question is, when are all these things going to be delivered? And so it's a natural thing to worry about. But they approach it this way. They said, well, here's all the things we might do this month. And then here's maybe next month. And then we could even see it go out into like bigger timescales. So Q1, Q2, as we go into like quarterly ranges. And the number of tickets start to increase. So there's a couple problems with this we can get off right off the bat. First, this is really how you manage a calendar. Calendar-based thinking about how work gets done. There's no concept of workflow. There's no concept of activities. We basically have some sort of throughput capacity for how many stories or work items we can put into a particular time chunk. So say it's a month or a quarter. And then we have this big bucket of capacity, and we start filling it up with different pieces of work. But right off the bat, there's a bit of a problem, because if we want to know how many items we can fit in to understand this capacity, sometimes you can just go based off a raw count of, say, epics or ideas. But I've seen a lot of the teams try to have some sort of estimate for these story sizes. But as you see, there's no actual workflow activity for sizing here. So you have a backlog here that's all dates, but it actually also hides these other activities that are happening at the same time, which gets complicated. So before things make it on this date-based backlog, there's some sort of sizing activity that happens. And so there's some work that happens, but we don't understand it. We don't actually see it on the board. Some process for determining how big something is, and it gets slotted somewhere. Again, when we go back to the capacity part, the denominator, we need to see, well, maybe how many pieces of work can a team get done within, say, a week or 2 months. Now, that's a problem, because that requires predictability to be useful. If it's maybe 20 items 1 month, and then 30 items the next, and 5 items the next month, our capacity, our bucket size is going to change every time we do this calculation. So all this planning we do for 6 items here, 6 items here, 6 items here, it may not really look like how much work we get done in the first place. So we end up having to then constantly move things back and move things forward. And it's not the good kind of prioritization or being responsive. This is all just wasteful reorganizing. Another thing is, once items make it onto this list, say they get slotted here at some point, and they wait. And they sort of just wait their turn until it's time to go. And then they hit maybe like a next column. Well, whatever was decided way back over here, once it becomes next to work on, information gets stale. So it's more likely that the whole other process needs to happen again, where it's, okay, let's take a look at what the item is, who is it for, is it still wanted? You've probably done all this work already at the front end, and now you're just waiting and then doing it all over again. Now, like I mentioned before, this is really dangerous, because this time-based backlog doesn't provide a way forward. The only way that I've seen teams make the jump from a date-based backlog to a workflow-based backlog is by saying, this is not working for us. we need to start over. Because there's no evolutionary where you can get from quarters and months and time and talking to stakeholders like this to having a better sense of, well, how does work actually flow in our system? What are the intakes? How do we work with customers? How do we define these ideas? When do we commit to these ideas? And how do we sort of signal that something is next or ready? It's a very long process that you only maybe can create the opportunity to go over this gap through a sort of expensive failure. So as much as possible, start off looking at how to design simple, appropriate upstream Kanban systems for your group, asking questions about who our customers are, what our sources of demands are, what our classes of service are. Agenda Shift has some really good items related to this, as well as the work of Patrick Stert and Upstream Kanban. Thanks a lot. I hope that was helpful.